Thank you very much, Acting President, and I'm pleased to rise, and I'll try and make it brief, on windfall gains tax. So as we know, the bill does several things, but I think one of the areas that probably I was most interested in was, and the reason Party was most interested in, because it's been a policy of ours, was really working out ways to encourage build-to-rent programs in Victoria, and this bill goes towards that. So build to rent along with build to buy schemes are innovative policy solutions, and I'm seeing a number of these types of projects occurring in my electorate of Northern Metropolitan. It closes the gap between people who can afford to rent but can't save the amount to get a deposit. Build to rent refers to, as the bill states, residential development in which all apartments are owned by one entity, often a managed investment trust, and then leased out to tenants. This is different, obviously, to the normal or the most common build-to-sell method, where a developer builds a residential development and then sells the apartments. We've seen some really innovative work done in this area, some really good designs, and designs that are also designed to create some social cohesion in these spaces. So I commend a company in my electorate, Assemble, who's operated by a great guy called Chris Daff. And when you look at the way that they design some of their buildings, they really look at some of the issues that I was going to yesterday around loneliness, that, the doors look, that when people come in, that they'll see their neighbours, that there's lots of common spaces, that it's expected that you might share tools to fix your bike, that you might share workspaces, that it's around creating communities. And, in build-to-rent models, these are things that can be done effectively and I think very well. So I'm pleased to see that we're seeing those tax concessions there. Probably where the government could have gone further, and certainly Mr Daff mentions this, is really encouraging that from a social housing perspective. So really looking at increasing those concessions when social housing is a proponent as a proportion of that. Sadly, I think the Greens with their amendment possibly go too far at 90%. I would have liked to see 40 to 50%, but it's something that I will continue to explore with the government going forward about how we can do that. The bill, as Ms Lovell mentioned and as Mr David mentioned, removes the charitable exemption for men's-only clubs or for single-gender clubs. Now, as Mr Davis mentioned, I'm a member of a private club, but it has female men and women as members. Apparently, it was very progressive in 1996, but it seems a number of the men's clubs still don't see that that's the way to go. Of course, I brought a bill to this chamber last term to expand. To remove other charitable exemptions, and that would be on land that was used by religious organisations but used for commercial purposes, and certainly land that was used just for the advancement of religion. And I think sanitarium is a great example of this. Here is an extremely profitable company that competes in the open market against other companies like Kellogg's, Crafts and Nestle. They do not have to pay land tax because they're a religious organisation, and the money, they say, goes to advancing religion. Now, if you were using that money to solve homelessness, or to help disadvantaged, or to set up hospitals or health, then that I get. But when it's used for this very loosely described intention of advancing religion, and I'm not quite sure how, well, I understand, Weet-Bix don't advance religion, of course, although I think Kellogg's did have some very bizarre ideas about what breakfast cereal could do. However, the fact that those profits go to some, as I say, some very loose term of advancing religion, I don't think should qualify for land tax exemptions. Certainly where you worship should remain protected, but and those, as I say, reducing poverty, protecting health. So I will continue to fight for changes around the types of exemptions that we provide. But the thrust of this bill is to introduce a windfall gains tax on the uplift in land value resulting from planning scheme amendments that change the zoning of land. And I did meet with the HIA. I met with many of the building industry groups. In fact, I've had a number of meetings, and I think certainly when I met with them last year about this, what they were facing is very different to what this bill is now. So there has been some significant concessions, and certainly I know the Property Council acknowledged that there had been delays in the start of this, and much to probably the criticism of other organisations that said, no, let's start it now. But obviously this proposal doesn't begin until 2023. And let's remember that you don't work for a windfall. It's not like you grow something and then the land is rezoned. This is something you're given. This is effectively almost a gift. No goods is exchanged, so there's literally nothing to be done. And we know that people buy land to speculate on this. We know that there's kind of rent seekers out there that purchase land on the hope that there will be a windfall, that there will be a rezone. Or they go further than hope and they start campaigning and lobbying for that rezoning. And I believe, I think it wasn't that long ago in this House that the City of Casey came under quite a bit of review in this House and speculation. And in fact, the City of Casey has gone into administration for this exact reason. Because they were found that they were being lobbied via paper bags of money for rezoning and other development favours. So, given that the government is the one who makes the decision about the rezoning, I think it seems reasonable that they should actually get a cut of the profits to reinvest into the local community and across the state. It's about sharing that sometimes absolute mozza that people can make from a planning decision. And this can be a win for the developers. The developers are the ones who actually do the hard work. They're the ones that actually plan it, they put the infrastructure in, they do the hard work. Those that are possibly just speculating on the land, the cowboy rent seekers, now won't be able to take all the cream and leave the site with very little money. So when you see that huge gain from the landowner, it really shrinks what the developer can invest in that property. So I think this means that rather than profits going to overseas companies, property share portfolios, those funds will be reinvested into roads, plumbing, and the environment. And I'm certainly happy to say that I think as I said, I believe that the Property Council has made very good points and some really good has made some really good points to the government, and I understand that the government has listened to those. I know the Property Council and others would like to see further changes, but I think this actually finds a very, very good balance. And in fact, I was actually somewhat surprised about this because I had a meeting with a developer just yesterday, Mr. Tom Rowe, who is down in the Geelong area, big developer, passionate about growth, in fact, he was the chair of the UDIA for the Geelong branch for some years. He could not spruik windfall land tax more. He is an absolute advocate, and when I put to him the Property Council's arguments that they had put to me, he whacked every single one of them away. And he knows a lot more about it than I do. So he was meeting with me to convince me to support this, and he said it actually would help developers. And he said that, he said that, and one of the things, I think it's the UDIA, and I certainly think some of the opposition's amendments go to this, of somehow creating a kind of a GAC that covers everywhere. So rather than just a GAC for the growth areas, we'd have one that covered the whole state. Now, Mr Rowe is not that keen on a GAC. He thinks that's actually really bad policy. So he thought it would be even worse policy to expand that idea. And he argued, I thought, very, very well, that this type of tax is actually the fairest one, and that it won't lead to a change in housing prices. It won't lead to a change in a reduction in development. All of the fears that have been placed up here, he says that they will not, that will not happen. So we and this is reiterated by the Grattan Institute and obviously by Prosper, who have said some who make some really good points and go through a lot of the points that that the Property Council raised with me, and they're saying it's very unlikely that taxes will lead to higher house prices, and this was also confirmed by, as I say, Mr Rowe, and also confirmed by Prosper, who again doesn't have a dog in the race, unlike the UDIA and the Property Council, where they actually, a number of their members could be described as property speculators. So this is just one of those pieces of policies where there's a simple solution to the problem. And this probably could have been done many years ago. It makes a lot of sense. We know that the ACT did this, and I know the ACT is still going through a housing boom, and there is still properties being developed because the land is being released by the government. And I'm not going to stand here and stand in the way of this. I've listened to the industry, I've listened to Grattan, I've listened to Prosper, and I've listened to property developers, as I say, such as Mr Rowe, such as Robert Pradelin, and they have all said that this is actually the correct way forward. This is the way to ensure this. I would just make one note, one area that I do think we should be considering, and this is because, having done the homelessness inquiry, we know that transitional housing that people need when they're experiencing homelessness is desperately needed, and we just don't have it. People are leaving hospital into homelessness. People are leaving prison into homelessness. People are leaving mental health facilities into homelessness. We cannot allow this to happen in this rich state. This must change. Now, property developers are getting behind this idea. They want to retrofit their vacant properties while they're going through the planning process, and retrofit them to provide transitional housing with wraparound services for people experiencing homelessness, for people escaping family violence, for people coming out of prisons, for people coming out of hospitals. And they were seeking or suggesting that a land tax concession in those circumstances would encourage more developers to do this. So rather than looking around the city and looking at those empty buildings that are getting ready for development, and sometimes we know that planning can take up to five years at least for big developments, rather than those buildings just sitting empty while people are sleeping in the doorways of them, we could see encouraging more developers to take on retrofitting and putting in transitional housing into those buildings, while those people get on their feet to get into the private market, while we are building more homes, social homes, and also while those buildings remain empty. I'll leave my comments on this at that, but thank you.